6 months into studying meditation and doing that every day and Buddhism, and that I suddenly realized I was actually happy on my own. And this was coming from a place where I would fill up all my time. I was so busy. I had so many different things on the go, so many different activities, whether it was study, work, whatever it might be. And I realized that I could actually be on my own now. I could be with myself, and I could really face the painful emotions that I had been running from for so long. I was doing everything possible to avoid, to numb, to distract. And the beautiful process of meditation, it's what a lot of people don't realize is it's actually learning to be with the discomfort.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. Today's episode, I am joined by holistic psychologist Louise, and if you can relate to not feeling enough, then this conversation is going to take you on a journey of how to alchemize that into feeling empowered by knowing how to have your own back. And it appears a very big lesson that keeps showing up is to allow yourself to slow down, to know that you are not behind, and to truly honor where you're at, and to not be afraid to turn inward. So let's dive in. Louise, thank you so much for joining me, for being in conversation with me today. I'm really excited and also very honored to dive into the conversation that we're going to have today. And also just like, I know there's a lens of like vulnerability that also comes through when we start talking about, where we've been. And so I just want to first and foremost, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful, and I'm really excited to see where we go with this conversation today. Where I kind of wanted to start with you is, one of the things that you share is that you kind of had this journey of feeling like not enough. And I really wanted to just dive in and start there and just see like, where did that stem from for you? What was that really like for you? Like, what was that not enoughness?
That's a big question, but it does track back to pretty young, if I really reflect back on it. And I remember as a little girl, and remember talking about what music we liked in a group of friends. I was probably, I don't know, 8 or 9. And at the time I loved, I don't know if you have heard of them, Frente, but Mariah Carey you would have loved, or you would have known, Tina Arena. And so I was a bit embarrassed by these music choices. But even in such a little moment, I didn't feel enough to be able to just express the sort of music I liked. And, that might seem trivial, but it extended to then what I wore around certain friends and what I spoke about. And I really felt like I had to hide who I was. And then as I grew up in relationships and more intimate relationships, having this fear if they really knew me, then they wouldn't like me, or I was boring, or then when I was getting older, not smart enough, not charismatic enough, the list kind of goes on. And I think that really led to a deep drive to be ambitious and competitive from a young age, to try and fill that void of not feeling enough. And, like I'm sure you probably know, and anyone listening, that ambition only gets you so far, and achievement only gets you so far.
Wow. Where did you kind of pinpoint that it was I don't want to say a problem, but that it was in a way maybe like holding you back, where yeah, like where did you notice that?
I think it was later, actually, when I had a pretty significant breakup in my life. And I
Mm,
remember sitting in my room on my bed and looking around the walls and looking around at all my things. And I'd actually moved back into my parents at the time. I think I was almost 30. And
yeah.
I remember just thinking, I can't, I can't go on like this. I can't keep putting my happiness and this sense of not feeling enough and needing someone else to try and make me feel better about myself. And I felt really alone at that
Mm,
time, and I didn't know the path forward. And I was really scared to be alone. I think I'd been in relationships most of my life. So I think that was a real turning point for me to
mm,
realize I cannot go on like this. It was too painful and I needed to change something.
mm. And what like was that for you where you started to change? What was that journey like for you?
Yes, well, it was trying to figure out what to do, and
Yeah.
I'd suffered from I'd suffered from anxiety and panic attacks previous to that as well,
Mm,
and I tried a psychologist, and I also remember sitting in a psychologist's chair, and I was looking around at the white walls and looking at the whiteboard on the wall that she had up, and we were
mm,
trying to challenge my irrational thoughts about my panic attacks. And I walked away from that session. She was lovely, a beautiful psychologist, but I walked away from that session going, you know what? That's just not going to cut it. And I need something else. And
yeah.
ironically, I was studying psychology to be a psychologist at the time. And so then that really started putting me down this path of looking for alternative approaches.
Mm,
And ultimately, this all brought me back to starting with meditation. I knew it was good for me. You know, I've heard so much. I
mm.
think a lot of people know all the benefits. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to give this a crack. And so I started, I don't know if you know of binaural beats, but
I
it's, yes.
love listening
Yes.
to,
So
especially when I'm in that like creative space. Whew, I love it.
yeah. Yeah. And it's a great for people trying to get into meditation and find they can't just sit there and be with their thoughts
Yeah.
or their emotions. It's a great way. It changes your brain waves and then gets you into a meditative state really easily just
Mm.
by listening. So that was my entry point. And then I went really deep into meditation and Buddhism at the time, and then later yoga and all sorts of other different modalities. And really, it showed me that I had to go beyond my mind in order to heal, but also in order to feel really free and fulfilled in life.
And what ended up being like, was there a moment, was there something that really shifted maybe like the understanding that you had, or I guess that void in a sense, that need to achieve and that piece around not feeling enough, like was there this pivotal moment for you where like it really shifted, and what kind of changed for you?
Mm. I think probably 6 months into studying meditation and doing that every day and Buddhism, and that I suddenly realized I was actually happy on my own. And this
Mm,
was coming from a place where I would fill up all my time. I was so busy. I had so many different things on the go, so many different activities, whether it was study, work, you know, whatever it might be. And
yeah.
I realized that I could actually be on my own now. I could be with myself and I could really face the painful emotions that I had been running from for so long. I was doing everything possible to avoid, to numb, to distract. And
Mm,
the beautiful process of meditation, it's what a lot of people don't realize is it's actually learning to be with the discomfort. It's not trying to clear your mind. It's learning to sit with those uncomfortable emotions and thoughts, which most of us are trying to run from. And when you can do that, your life completely transforms. And I can't
mm.
say I don't always feel I'm enough, you know, and I don't, you know, I'm still ambitious. That's like lifelong. That's going to be a thing for
Yep.
me. But I'm in such a different space now. It doesn't cripple me. I'm not hiding who I am from
Mm,
the people in my life, in my career. So it can really change for people, and it changed for me.
yeah. Oh, I feel like I resonate so much like that. I don't know if for me, if it was like, oh, I'm not enough, but maybe I think ultimately it was because it just resonates so much just listening to your experience and your journey and, the outcome being that we like just overcompensate for that not enoughness and we just do
Mm.
anything and everything to fill that void. And, for me, it was like, all right, like the checklist of like, all right, write a book, do the speaking, do this, do that. And then it was like, you get to a point and you're just kind of like, why am I doing all of this? Like, what is this
Mm.
actually all for? And I've kind of always said, like, being in the space of entrepreneurship for feels like almost a decade now. Part of me like wishes that more, I guess, those that are in the space of supporting other entrepreneurs and creating those opportunities for mentorship, part of me wishes that there was just more of that question of like, well, why are you doing this and what is it that you really want, like
Mm.
those questions that actually make us, not force us, but in a way force us to actually look inward,
Mm.
and actually sit with all of that, because it's exactly like you said, that discomfort. We're always trying to figure out ways to just to numb, to avoid, and ultimately, like in the discomfort is where I feel like we can really like make those shifts. And that's where we really have the breakthroughs of the old ways of thinking, believing, all of that. That's where we create these like little tiny micro shifts of, even just the awareness of like, I realize why I'm this overachiever is because I feel like I'm not enough. And then once you understand that, then you're able to actually look at this like root cause of it.
Mm.
And you're not avoiding it anymore. And I feel like I've always said when we have awareness, awareness is always power. It's this key that you can use awareness to always make a change, transform your life once you have the awareness of something that just doesn't align with you anymore, isn't a way that you want to be, live your life, all of that.
Yes, well, I mean, you touched on so many things that are really paramount to how I work with people. And one of them is really redefining silence and learning to
Mm,
allow silence and slowing down to be a friend, an ally, and not a fearful place to go to. And when we start to do different practices that work for us, whether it's journaling or free
mm,
writing or just being quiet, meditation, breathwork, whatever it might be, yoga, allowing these moments for our mind to quiet so that we can go beyond our mind and really tap into our real heartfelt desires, our
mm,
heartfelt goals, which are not defined by society or what someone thinks is best for us or if it's going to make us the most money. And a lot of people, and I know I didn't spend enough time trying to slow down and really get to,
mm.
well, who am I and what do I want to do with this one incredible life.
Yeah.
And I think you also
Do-
said something about the moments, and I say that all the time to clients, that we transform our life in the moment, and then
mm.
that moment becomes another moment and then another moment, and then it becomes a habit, and suddenly you're like, oh wow, I don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think sometimes we think that there has to be this like one massive moment. And I feel
Mm.
like what we have to remember is that it is going to be in the tiniest little moments where the most profound things that you yourself need to hear come through. The
Mm.
simple thing of a conversation that you have with someone could be one simple little thing that maybe you've actually heard time and time again, but then you're ready to hear it and you're ready to actually receive those words. It's these little tiny moments where things start to really shift.
Mm.
I'm curious, going back to the stillness, because again, I resonate so much in the sense that there was, for a while, and especially in my life, it was just constant go 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 on to the next thing and really not savoring the moment of accomplishing something. It was just kind of like check 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 off the list, this like just achieving energy instead of really living in this place of fulfillment. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you about stillness and that slowing down, for you in your experience, did you have, were there some fears? Like, what was it that you kind of either resisted or maybe were afraid of, like the slowing down? Because I feel like that is such a massive shift and big piece that I want to continue to like put on repeat and until like my face turns blue, because it's the thing that I've learned in the last 2 years is that when you can slow down and create that space, then you can actually hear and you get to hear
Mm.
yourself and you really get to connect with, like you were saying, those like heart-filled desires that you actually want for yourself. But I'm curious, like, was there any fear for you? What was it?
Well, there was a lot. Initially, in the initial stages, it was, and look, I feel like I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I haven't been perfect. And when I would go into silence and be on my own, a lot of thoughts would come up that I actually don't really like who I am,
Mm.
and that was really hard to sit with. So there was a
Yeah.
lot of grief and sadness and regret that would come up in those moments, even boredom. And
Mm.
another element was I'm wasting time if I'm not doing something. And so they were
Wild.
probably the two
It's so interesting.
they were the two big elements initially.
Hmm.
So it took a lot of courage. And I do say this to people, it takes
Mm.
courage to face the things that you may not be happy about in your life, and that realization that you've ended up somewhere where you didn't think you'd end up and you didn't dream of this life. And it was all really important moments for me to get really real with myself and to ultimately forgive myself for the mistakes I have made in the past,
Mm.
and to move on and get really intentional about, okay, I haven't acted in ways that I always love, but I'm going to change that and I'm going to forgive myself in the process.
So many questions. First and foremost, I'm going to start with the forgiveness piece because I'm just curious, like, what did that look like for you? If there's anything tangible, like, what did that actually look like? Because I feel like that's something that people talk about a lot is forgiving yourself. But I'm curious, what was your process like for that?
That's a really good question.
It's
And
hard too.
it is hard actually to put it into concrete terms, but it was a process. It definitely wasn't
Mm.
a decision to go, oh, okay, I forgive myself now. It
Yeah.
was time. It was really reflecting on humanity as well, which
Mm.
also Buddhism really helped me to get a sense of humanity in terms of when none of us are perfect and we are meant to make mistakes and we are meant to have regrets, and hopefully we'll move towards a place where we won't see them as regrets, which, I can now say that I don't regret anything because it's made me the person I am now.
Mm.
So it was an intentional process of feeling all the feelings that come up when you might not like yourself or you might not like what you've done, and really
Mm.
feeling whatever that is, whether it's sadness, whether it's anger, grief, and then moving to a place of, can I accept, I don't have to like what I've done, but can I accept that that's happened? And now can I use that as a tool to be intentional and to love
Mm.
fully the people that I have in my life and to try and be the best person, the kindest person that I can right now and from this moment onwards. So I guess it was a motivation. I used it as a motivation
Mm.
tool once I felt all the hard stuff.
Yeah, because that's, I mean, I so much courage going. I'm just thinking about that and what you said about courage. It's so that it does truly take so much courage to sit and face that piece of like I don't like who I am, or maybe there's just aspects of yourself that you don't
Mm,
like, and I
mm,
just I truly I don't know if I've experienced that on the. I think for me, it was always more on the physicality of things of just like, I don't like my body. So I feel like in ways,
mm,
there is that aspect. And, yeah, it's just funny how I think deserve as humans so much more grace. And you speaking about humanity, but I think even for ourselves, right? Like the grace piece is important because we are not perfect. We are all so far from it. And this need or this chase to try and even be perfect or create something that's perfect, and it's like this fallacy that is you're never going to be able to achieve. And it's not to say, it's just coming from this place, I guess, of just like making the mistakes is where we are going to learn. And I feel like some people are just maybe like designed to be able to like have more of that resilience. And then others, we learn that resilience along the way and along our journey as well.
Mm. Very true. And yes, I think the schools are starting to teach resilience now, but I'm pretty
Mhm.
sure when I was at school, we didn't talk about our emotions. We had our physical education classes that were very basic.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't learn about resilience. We didn't learn about our emotions or our thoughts. So I do feel like as much as I had a beautiful family and very loving, and they certainly gave me an amazing foundation, but I do feel like I had to really learn a lot around resilience and emotional resilience. Yeah.
Mm. I'm
Don't
I'm
feel it
curious.
came
This is
naturally.
just like, yeah, I'm curious, like just for fun, and because I completely agree with just the school aspect. There's so many gaps. I feel like when it just simply comes to our I guess wellness, and I just mean like all aspects of wellness, our mental, all of that. Um, what is like one thing, like one, let's say for example, class program that you like would love to have integrated into the school system that's not existing?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I love this. I've got two girls, so I really resonate with this topic. So they're teaching a lot more about emotions these days, so that's great. But what I would like to see is for people to start to learn a little bit more around listening to their gut, listening to their
Mm.
instincts, their intuition. And if we can get our children to be able to tune in and listen to those sorts of, well, that inner wisdom, that will transform peer pressure. It will transform what they want to
Mm.
do with their lives later on. It will also transform their happiness because they will know who they are and they know they can always tune in and find the answer that they're looking for. So that is what I would want to add to the
Oh,
curriculum.
amen to that. I love
Yeah.
that so much. And I think maybe, does it come from a place of you knowing what it's like to not have that connection to your gut, to your instinct, and then finally building that relationship and then it changing your life? Like what was that like for you?
Totally. I mean, I've been an overthinker from as early as I can remember, and default pattern is definitely anxiety. And so, yeah, I would overthink everything, and I would people please, and all
Mm.
of those things really undermine, well, they undermine my confidence and my self
Yeah.
esteem. And it's been a process in the last few years to really trust my intuition and my gut, especially when I don't have a logical explanation for these things. I just know them or I sense them, and really
Yeah.
being able to lean in and go, yeah, I can hear that. And the more we listen to it, the stronger it gets.
I was also thinking, because you mentioned you have girls. So I imagine too. Okay, two questions. How do you instill that in your girls? I'm curious what that
Mm.
looks like for you, and just like your relationship with them, and how do you practice that for like support them in making that connection with their intuition and their gut? And the second question that I thought about earlier too was just, as parents, how do we also give them that autonomy, especially at a young age, right? There's, I think, maybe a little bit of balance, and I don't have kids, so I'm just curious, like, how do you instill that in them, and then also navigating when they're following their gut, and you're kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, and it's maybe conflicting in ways.
Mm. My girls are still pretty young, well, almost 6, almost 4. However,
Okay.
I'll answer your question, both questions in a like a simple example just to give you a sense of
Mm-hmm.
what I do. But the way I feel listening to your intuition really starts at a foundational level is knowing and listening to your emotions. Your emotions are your tools, and not only your emotions but also the sensations in your body, which again they are tools as a foundation for starting to listen and get to know how intuition actually shows up for you, because it's really different for different people. So with my
Mm-hmm.
children, particularly my eldest one, well, both of them, really listening and providing space for their big emotions. And my
Mm-hmm.
eldest is starting school soon. So we did a trip to the school. And they said that for the first time to the school, they would be splitting the kids from the adults, and the kids would be going off with a couple of teachers, and the parents would be going somewhere else. So immediately I thought, that's just not going to work for my girl. But anyway, I chatted to her about what was going to happen, and she just said, no, I don't like it. I don't want to do that. And so then she didn't want to go. And so
Wow.
then we started to talk about, okay, well, what would you want? What would you feel comfortable? What would feel good? And I remember saying to her, you don't have to do anything that doesn't feel good. And so I called the school and said, this isn't going to work. What else could we do? And so then, anyway, her dad went and sat with her, and I went to meet all the parents. And so that's a really simple example of my husband was the only one in the room. So everyone else was doing how they wanted the day to be structured. And I
Mm-hmm.
think this is a lesson for all of us and for me, that we actually have to challenge what is presented to us. If it doesn't feel good, well, it didn't feel good for me, it didn't feel good for my daughter, and actually support and acknowledge and validate what she was feeling, and then making an alternative plan. So for me,
Mm.
this is the foundation for her listening to herself, trusting
Wow.
in what she's feeling, and then taking action.
Oh, I love that. Such a like very simple example, but that is, I feel like, where it becomes so tangible to
Mm.
take that and be able to simply like honor and really hear. And then I think that also shifts the dynamic around, the whole parent child dynamic. I feel like
Mm.
it's a maybe a generational thing, but the whole I'm the parent, you got to listen to me and do as I say.
Mm.
And then I think, we create this shift to seeing each other, of course, as parents, especially as they are young and growing up. You are there to protect them. But then there comes a time where they do have a voice. And just like we all want to be able to simply like have conviction with our voice, like we can instill that in
Mm.
children and those generations at such a earlier age. And then it looks different. Then the journey of their life is going to look a little different, and they learn different lessons. And but at least they have that conviction as well with their voice, and they know how to trust themselves.
Yes. And if people don't have kids listening to this, this is actually a really good example as an adult, because we have to challenge the status quo.
Yes.
If we don't, we just people please, and it undermines our confidence in the smallest of moments. So if we're not happy about something, we have to use our voice, and we have to speak up and break out of the mold of conformity to really listen to ourselves and honor ourselves and what we want.
Yeah. There's one example that I think of even for myself because it's so visceral. Um, I'm mindful, I guess, in ways not to always talk about it, but let's just say like vaccinations and whatnot. And I remember just like viscerally in my body feeling like my body was just rejecting the idea of it. Um, and that at a time impacted my career and whatnot. And I just it was just like standing in my ground, standing in conviction, and knowing and trusting and like it's gonna work out, like everything's gonna work out, and everything worked out. And I'm so grateful that I prior though actually built this relationship of listening to my gut, because I feel like for a long time I didn't trust myself, and then I was presented with this tool. I don't know if you know about human design, but that was like the tool that helped me actually understand trusting my
Mm,
gut and
mm,
learning that connection. And so I started learning about that. And then, of course, there came this like opportunity to put it into practice. And I'm like, here we go, and it's so powerful on the level of just like for yourself, this conviction
mm.
that you build. It's not like in an instant. I think, again, going back to everything's a little thing about moments, right? You have one moment, and then you have the next moment, and then another moment. It's like this muscle that we train. It
Mm.
becomes easier then to trust yourself, to trust your gut.
Yes, I love human design.
Okay.
It's amazing, and it's a great vehicle, I find, for people to really, exactly what you've just said, to start to notice what's happening in their bodies. And that's one of the foundations that I really work with people on is when you got that sense in your body that it was a no, it's just this rejection, and you just feel it. We are not
Mhm.
trained to listen to that. We're trained to
Yeah.
do the pros and the cons list and this and that, and our bodies give us really simple feedback, and our emotions feedback about whatever situation we might be finding ourselves in. And so human design is an amazing vehicle to start to know different intricacies about how your energy might work as well.
Mhm. What was it like for you to, well, I don't want to assume, but did you feel like you always had this connection with your body and being able to kind of feel the emotions? And if not, what was that like for you to build that connection again? Like what were some of those
Yeah.
things? Maybe it was meditation, but what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I definitely did not have that
Okay.
relationship. I didn't realize that you could stop
Right.
and pay attention to your emotions and actually feel them. Like I said before, I was busy doing everything but feeling them. And I
Mhm.
actually didn't even realize that I was doing that until I hit roadblocks in my life, like I've touched on before. And I realized, hey, like this strategy of just making a goal and trying to achieve something is actually not going to work this time.
Yeah.
I need to do something different. And in terms of when I was having panic attacks and anxiety, I couldn't just put my mind to getting over it. I needed to learn something new. And this new path was really learning to slow down, to first identify that I was feeling something, and then where was I feeling it? In my chest, in my throat, in my forehead, in my stomach. And I do really remember when I was having conversations with, say, partners at the time, I'd actually feel the words get stuck, like they couldn't come out of my throat and out of my mouth. So I also noticed that.
Mhm.
And so it's taking those little steps. Awareness, it's the first thing. And why meditation is so helpful is because it helps you become more aware. However, you don't have to meditate if that's not your thing. You can just start to bring more awareness to what you're feeling. You don't even have to label it. If you can, great, but if you can't, doesn't matter. And then where do you feel it in your body? What sensations? Is it dull? Is it sharp? Is it spread? Is it small? And then can you just make room? Can you take a breath, feel what it is as those sensations, separate from the story, because then our stories and our thoughts tend to come in and then make the emotions and the sensations worse. But that was another transformational practice I learned, that if I just stayed with the sensation of, say,
Mhm.
grief or anger or whatever it might be, it would dissipate on its own. But when you get caught and hooked into the story of, oh, I wish I said that, or I wish I didn't say that, then it like sparks the fire of those emotions again. So that was one of the best tools that I learned. If you can stay with the physical sensation of an emotion, you can actually get through it, and it subsides fairly quickly.
Wow, that's really powerful. I've never heard anyone explain it that way either. And I
Okay.
feel like
Mhm.
our mind is yeah, it's a powerful tool, and it also can get us into tricky situations where we end up in this. And it's and I feel like maybe the way that I'm kind of understanding it too is just like the mental loop that we go through, and
Mm.
we just create all these stories around the situation, whatever that looks like. But yeah, like that piece, I feel like about just shifting into more of focusing on the what's happening in my body, what am I feeling, it actually interrupts us from the story as well. We
Yes.
Because we're
Yes.
not able to do both at the same time. Okay, what am I feeling? And oh my god, I wish
Yes.
I like you're gonna be, you're gonna
Exactly.
be ping
Mm.
ponging, but you can't do both at the same time. So no one, of course, it makes sense that if you're focused on what you're feeling and just being able to follow it, no wonder the story, the mental aspect of it doesn't take you into that downward spiral. And then, you kind of have to take yourself back up at some point. It's
Mm.
hard to really get stuck in those spirals. And I feel like
Mm.
I resonate so deep. Like I know what it's like to be in those spirals, and it's really challenging and it's really hard, especially when you're experiencing it alone. But finding, again, it's we empower when we can find these tools, we can empower ourselves. And I think
Mm.
that just ultimately goes back to kind of like us starting even this conversation of you always being in relationships, and that, I guess, in a way, like dependency on having someone else. And it's like
Mm.
being able to know that we've got ourselves, and it
Mm.
doesn't mean that we don't need people in our lives. It's just the need is different, the relationship is different, but we know that we have ourselves, and that's very empowering. That's such an empowering thing to know, is that you can trust yourself, you can really feel what you're feeling, and you're able to move through the emotions on your own. It's empowering spot to be in.
Yes. And it's what ultimately got me through panic attacks when I learned that I could
Mm.
learn to feel safe in my body, just me. And that was simply being with the rush of adrenaline and the fear of a panic attack, and then breathing and just allowing it all to be there. And I really clearly remember learning that, hey, I can actually tap out of those spiraling, looping, negative spirals. And when I
Mhm.
learned that, that also helped with the panic attacks and the anxiety. I didn't realize you could actually unhook from those thoughts and then come back to the sensations, and then it gets you through it quicker. And
Wow.
I didn't realize you could. And I was studying psychology, so I assume there's a lot of people out there that don't even realize that you can do it. And it's very
Mm.
empowering when you realize you can do it for yourself, and it's free.
Yeah. And it's free. I love that. I love that so much. Wow, I'm really grateful for this like conversation, and where
Mm.
we took everything. And I always love ending with just getting like your, one piece and words of wisdom as it relates to kind of everything that we've talked about. If you were to kind of sum it all up into, some piece of advice, not a word, but like, some wisdom to share, to leave those that are listening, I'd love for you to just share what comes to your heart.
Okay. So, the most profound learning that I've had over the years is really starting to see your life, the people in it, the situations you find yourself in as mirrors, and they are mirroring to you what you need to heal, what you need to change, what you need to cultivate. And by changing my perspective to how can I see this situation that I'm in or this relationship as a mirror? What can I learn? What do I need to let go of? That is such an empowering place to be in versus that life is happening to me.
I love that. You are so potent with your words.
Oh, thank
I don't
you.
know where that comes from, but wow, like you are just so, yeah, you have so much wisdom and so much potency in the words that you intentionally use. So I'm just so grateful for this conversation, for you sharing your experiences with me and with those that are tuning in and listening. Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media, and we'll see you in the next episode.